Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Ooh, the Cryptid Huntress, aka Jessica Jones. It is always absolutely epic to see you awaken me from my slumber once again here in the Fox Den for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy. Well, that was absolutely delicious. And thank you for releasing me from my shackles. Without further ado, it is time for Jessica Jones and StarFox Radio to take a walk into the darkness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, once again, it is Midnight Lycanthropy time here on StarFox Radio, the Cryptid Huntress, aka Jessica Jones, has made her way through the werewolf, Dogman, and cryptid-filled forest to sit around the late night fire and burn the midnight timber as we again try and figure out what is occurring with these entities called dogmen or werewolves. Jessica, what is up, my friend?
Hey there. I have been dipping and diving, ducking and bobbing and weaving, trying to stay away from all these werewolves, but chasing them at the same time. What's up with you? It's so good to be back. Thank you for letting me come hang out with you tonight. Man, we got a lot to talk about. I've got some werewolf stories that I want to discuss tonight. And I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff we could talk about.
This is excellent, and yes, it's always great to get you here on the Fox Den and try to figure out what is occurring with the madness throughout the globe. But yes, definitely what's occurring here within the United States. And of course, to everyone that doesn't know, Jessica Jones is always busy, but most likely anyone that's watching and listening has seen your stuff. But all her links will be up, and she's always putting out live, full-length content. So I see you've been extremely busy. And to fully answer your question, just nerding out and unfortunately weeding out some hoaxers, and on a very good note, well, just doing a ton of global research. And I'd sent you some of the images and such I had been working on, like those little, not thumbnails, but little knowledge plates that I can put up in my videos and such that just explain strange cultural mentions of whether it's leopard people and all kinds of stuff. So staying busy like you for sure.
I love your creativity, and you're putting out some great work. I'm super proud of you. You're getting the word out, and we're all getting noticed out there with a lot of the work that we're doing. I was so shocked. This week, someone sent me a message on one of my YouTube videos. And yes, I do 4 live shows a week over on my channel, The Cryptid Huntress. So everybody, please go over there and subscribe. But one of my viewers sent me a message saying that they had watched this really amazing documentary on Dogman of Sudan and Iraq. and it was a big old channel with a lot of viewers and stuff. And they said that I had been mentioned on there in my channel, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And so they were actually quoting one of my guests on there. And I got to say, it really made me feel good, because the work that we're doing, you and I, is really touching the lives of a lot of people, and it's spreading around the entire world. That video was based out of the Middle East, okay, that YouTube channel. So I'm super stoked. We're putting in the work. We got the boots on the ground, and we got a whole lot of airtime on YouTube and all these other outlets. So keep up the good work. I'm super proud of you.
That is so legendary right there for sure. And you did send me that, and that's some great kudos and some big girl stuff there for sure. So let's effing go, as Tom Brady would say. And I do appreciate the feedback right there and the kind words for sure, because that was one thing I always wanted to do, is make sure I could keep the creative and artistic aspects of myself into what I'm doing, and still be able to portray, a gimmick and a character, like with my Star Fox demeanor, because acting is something that I don't fully enjoy. Wait, what? What do you mean, Star Fox? You just said you did. Well, no, I enjoy it being, my Star Fox, but I don't enjoy what I used to have to do with acting on set and trying to just create films, 15, 20 hours of working on stuff. It's really not even close to as fun as people would think, especially when you're looking at like a 10 by 20 foot half of a house, where on the outside it looks like, you're outside, and on the inside it looks like a living room, but that's it. And you're acting like you're in here. Yes, that's what acting is, but it's not fun. So I wanted to do something where I was able to get out knowledge and proper information about topics, but also still be able to have like a creative aspect and show like my artistic side. So no, I totally appreciate that, because I ironically get like zero support from people within my family that should be supporting me, but I get a ton from great people and beautiful minds such as yourself. So thank you very much.
Oh, Ken, that's the thing that I've experienced too. A lot of us experience that when we're, going on our path and doing the things that we're really passionate about. A lot of times, the people in your, I hate to say it, but like your family and your closest friends, the people you grew up with, may not understand kind of where you're coming from and what you're doing. And so it's the strangers that are going to give you the most support, the people you've never met before, the people who live, hundreds, tens of thousands of million miles away, that are going to be your biggest support group, your biggest cheerleaders. And God sends those people to us to keep us on the path, and to give us that support that we need. And so I'm excited. I love working with you. I think we have a really good time doing this, because we both have a passion for, the mysteries of the world, and to find out what the heck a dogman is, where these dogman sightings are, werewolves. And man, I've been doing some deep diving on some werewolf and dogman stories out of the UK, and I actually got inspired after I saw that clip. I actually watched the whole documentary of that Sudan and Iraq dogman documentary, and where they mentioned me, and I watched it, and it really inspired me to start digging into international dogman sightings and reports. And I was so stoked to find maps similar to what the NADP puts out, but there's one in France actually. I forgot where I found it. It was probably on Reddit or something, but there was a map of all of the different, I don't know if you call them counties. I mean, we have counties or states here in the United States, states and counties. But some kind of different regions of France, they had them all listed, where all the dogman sightings had been. And this was recent. This was 2023 actually, and it was a good quarter of the country at least. A quarter to a third of the country had counties, or whatever those regions were, whatever they're classified as. They had sightings in all of them, and they even put the name of the person who had the sighting and made the report on top of that map, so you could see who it was, and they had references and everything. So, and of course, dogman sightings go back potentially hundreds of years. Even in France, they had the Biso Gévaudan. that occurred back in, I forgot what century that was. It was a long time ago. I'm not positive that was a dogman. I personally think it was a hyena that was attacking and eating people, but it could have been a hyena dogman. I mean, we really don't know. So just long story short, I'm super excited to see that other countries around the world are really digging into this dogman topic because they're experiencing dogman just like we are here in the United States.
That is absolutely great stuff right there. And I can't even fathom just all the stuff that is occurring. My brain is just always wondering and thinking outside of what could be occurring. And geez, no matter what, even as I'm getting ready to go to bed, something will pop into my head and I'll be like, wait a second. And you have some really great stuff you want to talk about tonight. But like, for example, I am pretty sure that the whole devil monkey, the gugway, and the baboon version dogman are just baboons in general that have escaped, because I know there are examples of primate facilities, like I believe it was sometime in the 2000s that in Florida, a large one got hit by a hurricane and a bunch escaped. And they're dominant, predators, especially if they're capable of having a successful like breeding population. But we also seem to think that like the Dinopithecus, those giant baboons, are still kicking around, and the depiction of those literally fits in perfectly to baboons and the Dinopithecus. So yeah, interesting stuff for sure. And do you want to blow some more minds with what you've been up to? For sure.
I do. Well, what you just said reminded me of some research that I've been doing. I actually spent some time up in Long Island, New York last year. Yes, the Southern girl went to New York, and half the people couldn't understand what I was saying because my accent was so heavy, and I couldn't understand what they were saying, and it was really funny. We had a good time. But I was up there in Montauk with some survivors of the Montauk Project. If you're not familiar with that, you guys look it up. It's a secret, kind of like a clandestine black project that went on allegedly. I think it's not allegedly. I think they're out there in the open with it. Mind control, telepathy, teleportation, time travel, all that kind of stuff happened up there. And I went with a group of survivors of that, and I got to go bigfooting on. We just went cryptid hunting up there at Camp Hero with a guy named Long Island Bigfoot Mike and Brian Minnick, who has a YouTube channel called Montauk is Strange. All born and raised up there. And Brian had family and friends who worked at Camp Hero, where that Montauk project took place. He is the resident expert. He has spent his entire life exploring the entire area, the underground facilities there. He knows that place like the back of his hand. He took me on a tour of it, blew my mind 100%. And he came on my show this week, and we talked about the Plum Island Laboratory, which is where they did secret, allegedly, mutant experiments, where they were actually, it's like an animal disease laboratory. They're very famous for having this whole Lyme disease stuff occurring up there. I'm not sure I'm not going to say they created Lyme disease there, but they might have. I have no idea. They work on stuff like that there. But there have been strange animals that have, washed up on shore. One's called the Montauk Monster or the Plum Island Monster, depends on what article you're reading. Strange animals that some say, well, maybe it was a raccoon. Others say, well, maybe it was a dog. We don't know what it is. But also a humanoid washed up on shore as well at Plum Island. It was a man that had extremely long fingers, they said. And just weird stuff like that. So all these weird experiments. A lot of dogman sightings in the area too. Our friend Mike, who lives up there, has had several dogman encounters in the same vicinity at that same area up there around Montauk. So yeah, but yeah, I guess I was just kind of mentioning that the whole Plum Island facility out there, it's an island right off the coast of Montauk, New York, which is the very northern tip of Long Island, New York. So it's a great information in that show. If anybody wants to go see it, go check out my YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress, and look for Plum Island. The show is called Plum Island Mutants, I think. But that's not what I wanted to talk about tonight. I wanted to talk about some dogmen in the United Kingdom. And these stretch all the way back to the 1970s. And something caught my attention I'm going to say about a month or two ago. I was thumbing through, TikTok, my favorite news source. I say that, I'm joking. TikTok and or Instagram, and I found this. It was like a commercial for a documentary that had occurred back in 1976. It was the BBC Current Affairs report, and it was actually a clip from that report. This was a nationwide report on a werewolf that was associated with a set of stone heads, which were like carved doll heads, like an effigies, I guess, found by children by Hedron's Wall on the border between Scotland and England. And this was aired one time on the BBC Current Affairs report, one time, and it made everyone so upset that they never aired it again. There was no mention of it. They hid the program. And just several years ago, someone found the footage, and through AI technology, they were able to go through and fix, because it had been sitting there since 1976. They were able to go and digitize it, I guess, and fix the audio on it. And they were able to make that clip that I saw on social media. And let me tell you, this is wild, because it's actually a case of let's just say cursed objects being found and being associated with a cryptid like a dogman or a werewolf. And anyone who had these heads, they call them the Hexam heads, Hexam, Hexam heads. Anyone who had them in their possession had a cryptid encounter. The first family, there were two young boys that dug these things up in their garden. And when they dug them up, they took them inside the house and they showed their parents, and they immediately started having weird activity, paranormal activity in their home. And they saw what they described as a sheep man, like a sheep squatch or a goat man. They had that encounter. They got so freaked out by this that they sent these things to be examined, because they thought that potentially they had a Celtic origin to them. So they had a woman actually, who was a doctor. Dr. Ross, Anne Ross. She was an expert on Celtic artifacts and Celtic architecture and Neolithic art. They sent these stone heads to her, and she put them in her house, and she started having paranormal activity as well. But more than that, she had a werewolf or a dogman that showed up in her home while she had these stone figures in her home. And the story was so eerily familiar to me. When I was listening to this story on that clip, I started thinking about an episode of Dogman Encounters. Okay, so I'm good friends with Vic Cundiff, who has a YouTube channel and a podcast called Dogman Encounters Radio. And Vic had an episode, I think it was episode 100, and there was a woman on there in Germany who she lived in a literal glass house. And she said that she had a terrifying encounter one night, that she was in her home, her dog started barking and going crazy, and she looked up, and there was what looked like a dogman or a werewolf standing at the wall of her house looking inside her home. She said that she could see its face and its nose crinkled up. She said that its hand had a claw, it had claws, and it started tapping the glass of her house. And it was like beckoning her. And the way she described it was that she felt as though she was hypnotized, and she had to go towards it. She wanted to go towards it. She didn't want to run or hide. She was just trying to hold her dog back, But something that just really stood out was that she felt like it was hypnotizing her, like, come here, come see me, even though she knew that her life was in danger. Well, the same thing happened to this woman who is in England, or in the UK, right there on the border of Scotland and England. She said the same exact thing. She said in this interview that she did that I watched, she said, well, I felt like I was being hypnotized by this creature. She said that she just looked up and it was walking upstairs, and then it went downstairs to her kitchen. She felt like she had been exposed to the curse, I guess, of these little these heads that she had in her home. But she described it as a half wolf, half man figure walking around upstairs in her house. She followed the creature downstairs to the kitchen, after which it disappeared. Shortly after, Dr. Ross's daughter, her name was Bernice, also experienced almost the exact same wolf man in the house. Okay, so they're both having these weird encounters with what seems to be either a dogman or a wolf man in their home, and it's associated with this cursed object, or these cursed objects, which was really interesting. Okay, so I think not only were they having these encounters with the wolf man or the dog man, the kids who had the object before, who found the objects, said they saw like a goat man or a sheep man. And it's not just them, but the neighbors were even having paranormal experiences where the kids were getting their hair pulled at night and things like that. So it's really odd because they ended up getting the woman who saw the wolf man at her home. She said that she felt like she needed to follow it around. She didn't try to run. She didn't want to run. She wanted to go towards it because she felt like she was being hypnotized, just like the lady in Germany. Now, how odd is that? And what are the odds? It almost feels more paranormal than just a 3D reality type of flesh and bone, dogman kind of thing. I feel like there's more to it. It seems very supernatural, if you ask me. But it's so not uncommon for me to hear stories like this, where whatever they're seeing, whether a dogman or a werewolf, it seems to hypnotize people and lure them in. And it made me start thinking, well, I don't think that a lot of these missing people, I don't think the majority of them are going missing in our national parks because werewolves are luring them in and taking them. But what if, what if there's some sort of hypnotic aspect to them where they can hypnotize us and just lure us in like that? I don't mean like, I mean like us as in like a nation of people, all the people who are at these national parks, people who are going missing. What if they're luring people to them and then attacking them, and these people are never seen again? I mean, I think that could make up for a small percentage of these people who are going missing.
That is some great stuff right there, and that is super creepy. And throughout my research, I feel like a big difference between like the cynocephaly and like the dogman and then like werewolves is the fact that it seems like the term werewolf and anything that involves shape-shifting, whether it's in Nordic culture or if the Druids make reference to it or the Navajo or any culture, then it always stems from some sort of dark witchcraft and occult type activity, meaning you got to do some shady stuff. So I think that is definitely the big difference when, like you were saying, with some of the appearances and maybe potential where it seems more supernatural and spiritual based if it was something that had been quote unquote summoned through black magic or occult activity like what Heinrich Himmler and the Dirty Stash were all about. Yeah, that would make a ton of sense right there. And when you look at like the cynocephaly per se, they are always reported to have to walk down from the mountains to trade with people and Herodotus and such. And Alexander the Great said that they could be unalived just like anyone else. Yet they did fight a little bit more hellacious, which is something, sounds reasonable. I mean, let's just say a Neanderthal and a modern day human, same type of thing. I mean, they would be much harder to unalive than we would be. And yeah, you'd much rather have one of those on your side than against you too. If I guess the cynocephaly per se were to be supernatural based, I don't see why Alexander the Great would say cold steel worked on them. And also, I would think that they would probably hop into a portal or something or do something magical instead of walking, because that's quite a long walk down to trade with people from the mountains when you could just pop into something magical, right?
Yeah, well, the way I look at it is this. Some people say, and I believe too, that cryptids can have supernatural abilities. But look at it this way: humans have supernatural abilities. I'm extremely psychic and very psychically switched on, and I can do some pretty weird stuff. What some people would probably consider to be kind of magical, but being able to do remote viewing and things like that. Um, there's there's the element of being supernatural, but I'm flesh and blood and bone, and I think that they are too. I just think that there's flesh and bone. It doesn't mean you can't shoot them and they won't go down, and things like that. So I did want to mention too, though, you had mentioned Nordic mythology or being of Nordic background. And there's a theory that those stones that they found called the hexam heads. Okay, not the hexam stones, the hexam heads. Um, there's a theory that they actually were Nordic, of Nordic mythology, or Nordic, and specifically they are linked to a monster known as the Wolver. And I was wondering, I was like, wow, does that have something to do with the Wolverine? Okay, like Wolverine, one of the best Marvel characters ever. This half-human wolf man closely matched the descriptions offered by Dr. Ross and her family. So that's the woman who saw him. The Wolver is exactly what she described that was in her home. Now, the Wolver in mythology was a powerful spirit, but was benevolent towards all humans until he was provoked. So I just wanted to make a note of that, that is one of the theories as to what this was that was in the home of Dr. Ross and her family that she was seeing. I just find it really wild and odd to have something like a werewolf showing up in your home. Okay, showing up in your home, connected so intimately to these hexam heads. Really interesting, but I think there could be some sort of Nordic connection to it.
That is great stuff right there, because Nordic and all the ancient cultures as well, like the Aztecs and such, speak about that. I mean, even the ancient European cultures. But yes, I've even found documentation of Chinese culture and Japanese culture speaking about it. Much easier to find it in Japanese culture because the Empire of China is very old historical empire. I believe they might be the oldest modern day civilization. And again, though, just with belief systems and such, it's not the easiest to find historical aspects about their culture, but they're there. I mean, I found some and they're an ancient culture. So I definitely believe they probably have a ton of documentation as well as to these strange beings and also dark witchcraft and shapeshifters and such. So it's pretty bizarre stuff for sure. And there was actually a couple interesting cases. Did you ever hear about the one in Germany where those few villages ended up seeing what they said were 100 or more werewolf women, or dog women?
No, I am so intrigued by this, though. I would love to hear about it.
All right, so this was back in like the 1800s, and it was, I believe, called the Lupich werewolf women. So more or less, you had these villagers that claim they were seeing these werewolf women, but we have a couple different hypotheses as to what could be occurring, meaning it really could have been women that were wearing wolf skins and such, because I do know that it is something in certain cultures that is done. I mean, I know in certain Native American cultures, when they're reenacting things, they'll wear the skin of the animal too while they're around like powwows and such. So it could be that. But also at this point in time, it was very prevalent for mold and certain bacteria to get into like the yeast they used for bread and also in their grain. So when you have these couple of villagers that were in close proximity to each other, it's really not that hard to think that obviously they were trading with each other. So if one village is eating this bread that is got, hallucinogenic type tendencies to it, the mold and such, well, they could all, potentially be seeing something. Or the final aspect is, was it really these groups of female looking like werewolves howling and running through the woods and fields?
Ooh, okay. So I'm looking it up now, and this happened in 1591. So in the 1500s, in 1513, I believe is the exact date that the Piri Reis map came out depicting civilizations of dog-headed people. So I just wanted to make that little tidbit known right there. And I think that's really interesting. It says these lycanthropic women attacked men, boys, and cattle, adopting lupine form and slaughtering their victims until 85 of them were apprehended and burned at the stake on May 6th of 1591. Wow. I mean, they could have been actual she-wolves or werewomen because, like I said, the Piri Reis map does depict dog-headed men, dog-headed women on the map back there at that same time frame, the same exact century, only what is that, 80 years apart there.
No, that's absolutely excellent stuff and just shows that great research on your behalf because you were able to just connect the dots right together like that. And yeah, I mean, obviously, certain people thought enough to do some terrible things to them that they were into something. So they very well could have been. And that's another interesting case from over in Europe because, I mean, those areas have some really deep lore. And I know there's another similar account where a young teenager ended up finding some sort of relic or a wolf skull or something, and they brought it back to their cabin. And then they ended up being like harassed in their room by what looked to be some sort of shadowy like werewolf type figure. And this is like a long time ago. And this was before what you had told me. This is like a long time ago. And then once they put back like this relic or whatever, or this skull, they ended up, no longer having this interaction. So that made me think of that when you were also talking about the case where you had referred to the doctor and her family. And that also reminds me of what I'd asked you about too with a converse werewolf. What are your thoughts on that? Or should I just dive in with the audience to give them a little update?
Dive in with the audience a little bit because I'm not super familiar with it, but I'm super intrigued by it.
Yes. So the Converse werewolf occurred in what is now Converse, Texas. And this was in the late 1800s. This gentleman that was a farmer moved into a remote piece of land with his teenage son. But he felt like his teenage son wasn't masculine enough. So apparently forcing him to go out on a hunting trip by himself, well, that was the way this farmer wanted to get the masculinity to come out of his son. Either way, sends the kid out. Kid doesn't enjoy hunting, has no idea about this stuff. Seemed to be more of an artistic type mind. But either way, he's out there and comes running back. Is hysterical, tells his father he was chased by some sort of description of a werewolf-like creature. The farmer laughs at him, obviously, and is pissed off because you don't have the deer I told you to get, and now you're just lying to me. So he flips out at his son, tells his son to go back out, and you need to get a deer. Son goes back out, never returns. So the farmer obviously gets a little bit worried at this point in time and then proceeds to get a group of individuals to try and find his son. Well, they end up going pretty deep into the woods, come to a clearing like a meadow, and find what seems to be what his son has described to him, this werewolf like creature consuming the young teenager. And there was a large portion of him being consumed, and only when they fired off their rifles at this being or entity or creature, whatever, did it run off, and then they were able to get what remained of the farmer's son. But pretty gnarly stuff.
Yeah, that's super gnarly. That dad sucks, man. That sucks. I'm just gonna say, like, that was wrong with a capital R what he did to that kid. It's really sad, but I mean, I understand. Listen, I want my son to be tough too. That's why I take him out in the woods, and we go bigfooting and stuff, and dogman hunting, whatever. You know, my kid's out there with me a good bit, not always, but that's really sad. And wow, I mean, uh, it showed you that there were potential dogmen back then in the 1800s in Converse, Texas, and Texas is a hot spot for dogmen sightings and things like goatman sightings too. It's not just dogman and Bigfoot sightings. They got plenty of those, but they've got goatman, sheep squatch, you name it. Oh, and pterodactyl sightings. I've actually had a buddy of mine on my show who had a real life pterodactyl experience in Texas. So I don't know what's going on in Texas, but it's been going on for a long time.
Right? So gnarly for sure. Down in the Dogman or Werewolf Triangle down there. Yeah, there's a ton of instances, and Texas is a really old area because I remember there was basically back in the Wild West times where a sheriff ended up having some sort of interaction in the town with what seemed to be a werewolf after, because once they unalived it, it transformed back into a person, which we don't think that's what the Dogman would have done, but that's definitely something, that would happen supposedly if you were a shapeshifter. But he was told by some local indigenous people that this individual was basically bad juju. And so, yeah, no, there's a lot that has occurred, like you said, down in the Texas area. It's pretty gnarly stuff. And it's unfortunate, though, too, that there's so much actual stuff that really needs to be looked into. But then, like what we were just speaking about earlier with people hoaxing and stuff, it ends up just always muddying the water, because that was the same type of stuff that happened in the beginning until, Sasquatch got enough momentum. But even with like dinosaurs, where people were hoaxing, meaning they were combining a bunch of statues and just saying this is the way the dinosaur looked. But then they were like, no, this is not. This head goes over here. They didn't like stand up like this. So no one took that serious either until someone actually took it serious. And there is stuff to be taken serious, and I feel like we're getting closer. But then every time you run into, like an instance where someone is hoaxing something, whether it's a true malicious thing or they're dealing with inner demons and just need friends, which there's way better ways to go amongst it, but it makes it tough to present things, because no matter how much we do our due diligence on something, the issue is you can still be yanked or trolled, because you can only do so much background check on an individual. Now, when it comes to history and stuff, you can dive all day, but when someone comes to you and tells you that they have something they'd like to speak to you about, and you check, people that know them, they're like, yeah, he seems like he's all right, and you talk to him a few times. That's really all you can like do. And then, you add that to what potentially could be occurring, and then you find out, well, wait a second, they're just full of it. So no, it had no sort of biological relevance in the description of, the layout of the female dog, so it just kind of stinks, but it is what it is, right?
I mean, every one of us who are in this field have at some point fallen for or almost fallen for with some people with their stories. And it really does pay to have some good psychic intuition when it comes to taking investigative reports from people and stuff. But I mean, some people do slip through the cracks. But lucky for us, I'm really good friends with a fellow boots on the ground field researcher of all things cryptid, particularly Bigfoot, out of Bexar County, Texas, where Converse, Texas is, I do believe. I was just looking this up online. Rod Nichols, actually, of Bexar County Bigfoot, would be a great resource for all of this information here. He's actually been on my show before. We've talked about the Dogman Triangle in Texas, and I might just have to have him on the show sometime to talk about the Converse, Texas werewolf, because I think he'd know at least a little bit about it.
Right? That's a brilliant idea. I mean, he would definitely know more than I would know. I mean, I'm just doing as much historical stuff as possible, but it's always more prevalent in the area to just know a little bit more than to be an outsider. Meaning, when I'm an outsider to an area, there's only going to be so much I can gather on a topic. When if you're there, you're just going to know more. So that's absolutely excellent right there. And before we start letting you roll back to the things you need to attend to.
Sorry, she's still over here barking. I'm trying to get her to be quiet.
Oh, you're good.
All right, we're good. We're good.
Cool.
My son's got a hold of her. We're doing.
All right, well,
we're doing
wrapping
treats.
it up anyhow, too.
Yeah.
So before we let you get back to the super busy schedule you always have, is there anything else you would like to touch base on or speak about before we decide to close the Midnight Society book for the evening?
I just want everybody to stay safe out there and keep chasing these mysterious stories and creatures and encounters. Please send any kind of information you guys have about any kind of sightings of werewolves and dogmans to one of us, to some of us, to the North American Dogman Project, so we can kind of start getting a grip on what's really going on out there. And until then, I am still planning some more boots on the ground field research. I got some trips planned with cryptid warfare operators and my team, all of my teams. I'm on 4 different teams. We spend a lot of time out there doing some boots on the ground research, and I'll keep my ear to the streets. And together we are going to make lots of leeway in this field. So thank you for having me join you tonight. It's been a pleasure and always a lot of fun.
Appreciate you so much. And look at that. That's a big stack up right there. And anybody that wants to get a hold of Jessica, she has her information where you can access her right on the thread. And also, Jessica covers way more than I do. So if you ever do need to or want to speak to individuals that have knowledge outside of what we cover here, definitely reach out to her. And I do look forward to seeing you again here soon, my friend. Much love.
Thank you.
Ooh, you legends, you. If you did make it this far this evening, I do truly appreciate every single one of you. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share the truth. And I will catch you very soon.